Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Coffee Tea, You and Me, our Friday session for entrepreneurs, business leaders, people who want to learn more and more about everything regarding small business. As many of you all know, I am Coach Powell. I am the small business guru. I try to help as many of you as I possibly can, understanding the ins and outs and the things that you need to think about and focus on to help your business grow, to help your business maintain its level of success, and to do it in a way that's fun and interesting and enlightening for you and the people that you serve. So I want to say, start off today, saying I give a shout out to my brothers of Phi Beta Sigma for sponsoring all of our activities here at Coach Powell's uh, training and development. And I'm having a little bit of a brain fart day this morning, and so I'm glad you're here to help you'll help me figure it all out and get through it. As always at Coffee Tea, You and Me, this is a business friendly environment. I repeat, this is a business friendly environment. We want you active and engaged in the chat. We want you sharing your information. If you have an event coming up or you have a special that you want to offer in your entrepreneurial ventures to other people, if it's a favorite book you're reading, post it in the chat. Let's get engaged and let's help each other as much as we possibly can. You have a question about anything we're talking about today or anything we talk about in the topic you won't even think about maybe for in the future, put the question in the chat. Let's start to develop and figure out ways that we can help and serve one another in different kind of ways. I don't want to just be a talking head that's just yammering on at you all about some ideas that I have, and I think my ideas are pretty good, but it's also good to have your ideas. And so anything that you want to think about or talk about or share in the chat, in the comment section, feel free to do so. We want to make sure that we honor and recognize you for where you are, where you're coming from. So if you're coming from, wherever you're coming from, put your location in the chat. If you're coming from a big city or you're coming from a rural environment, your city or state, I want to know in the chat. And we want to make sure whether you're looking on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or any of our promotion channels, definitely let us know where you're calling in or where you're looking from. Anyway, we're going to get started for today's session. Today's session is all about, again, diving deeper into business development, understanding all the ins and outs of business development and what it means to be a great business developer and how you can become better at it. Now, let me just start off with a lot of people are concerned about how business is done, how their business is going to look in the world and the universe out there, and what it's going to mean to them when it comes to accessing opportunities to engage new clients, new revenue sources, new streams. And it can be very daunting to get it right. You really, really have to focus on a couple of key direct traits that you're going to have to focus on embracing if you want to get this right. The first trait you have to have, and we talked about this last week, is you have to be able to have strategic pattern recognition. What do we mean by this? Your ability to qualify perfect candidates for your offering or your project or your process is super, super important. The more you can use your skills and talents to assess and to create an environment where people that naturally funnel and fit into your universe um, is a useful thing to do. In my program called the 100% closing ratio, I try to help people understand that you have to quickly learn how to separate suspects from prospects. Like almost everybody's a suspect for your product or service, whatever you're selling, right? But prospects are very special. Prospects, by definition, are people who want it, they need it, and they will afford it. So unless you have the answers to those questions, do they want it? Do they need it? Will they afford it? You probably shouldn't pitch a whole bunch of your idea because you're going to end up talking to people about things that they're not interested in, things that doesn't move them or motivate them or their teams or the people around them. And so you have to do your job in the qualification or discovery phase of any early contact with a suspect so that you get answers to those three questions. There are all kinds of ways about getting those answers to those questions. And there's no question that you also have to have executive presence and tons of credibility. The more you know about your product or space, the more experience you've had, the easier it's going to be for you to not just meet the decision makers, but work with the decision makers or stakeholders of any type to create the thing you want to create. The third thing you got to focus on and have, you got to have a curiosity that never sleeps, that never turns off. I mean, especially when it comes to discovery mode, when you are just initially beginning to understand what the problems of a potential prospect or suspect are, understanding, what's important to them and why it's important to them. That's the discovery phase. You need to understand all those things that you need, and it may take one, two, maybe five conversations. It depends on where you are in your relationship. If you're reheating a relationship where you already have quite a bit of time and expertise and talent in, then you don't have to do as much. But if you're starting a relationship from cold, you have to do a lot more discovery before you pitch something that's going to be meaningful to the person. And you want to try to have some, I call them, easy rounds loaded in your weapon, right? You want to have a couple of easy pitches that that somebody who's a potential prospect, you already discovered that they're really good prospect for this. You may not have answers to all your questions, but they're pretty close to being able to close a deal with or being able to even present a good deal to. You want to have some easy pitches or some easy things that you can offer them that might help you understand even more about them. So I always have a couple of articles I might recommend to somebody that's in their space or whatever, and I might want to get their feedback on that article. Might be an article or a program that I've written or discovered in some way, shape, or form. The fourth thing you might want to understand and do is that you have to have the relationship intelligence. You have to know how to assess, is this a good time to discuss anything for this person? Yeah, you might be disturbing them at lunchtime. Um, disturbing a meeting that they're in. Or you might be calling at a time when all of them when they're busy doing or heads down working on another project. So you want to clear the way to have a quick conversation, and you want to know how to do that fairly quickly. And if you can't do that because they didn't answer the phone, you have to leave a message. You want to leave a message that's attractive, but you have to know enough about the person to be able to do that. You have to know enough about the company and the desires of the vision that you might be trying to work your way into in order to do that. So you have to have a level of relationship intelligence, emotional intelligence. You have to know when is it time to really, really push the relationship to the next level? When's it time to relax and cruise? And how do you do that in a way that's going to keep you in your pipeline going? You're going to keep you in the mindset of moving forward with the person and they're moving forward with you. And that's kind of where I stopped last week, right? So I want to finish up. There's about four more areas that are super important, um, that are direct benefits, and they map to the 10 traits of people who are very, very good at business development. And so we're going to go through the last four traits. We talked about the couple of traits before. We talked about strategic pattern recognition. We talked about executive presence and credibility. We talked about a curiosity that never turns off. And we talked about relationship intelligence. The next couple are critical importance. So we're going to go deep into those ideas. Number six, you have to have discipline follow through. Why is that? When you have discipline follow through, you can generate predictable pipelines and fewer lost deals. If you don't have a strategy of how you intend to follow through with the people that you meet, the commitments that you make, the strategies that you're using, then you're kind of shooting from the hip all the time. And it's very, very difficult for you to achieve measurable results. This is why in professional athletics, you can see that they measure everything. They measure how many times they're at bat. They measure how many times they swing. They measure how many times, they connect with the ball. And what do they do with the ball when they generally connect with the ball? Do they hit pop-ups? Do they hit big, big winners? Is it a third base down the line drive? And they are measuring every statistic of every player in every moment of that player's time on the field. And those become predictable patterns of behavior that then can be looked at, and gone, okay, what do we need to tweak? What do we need to work on in practice and rehearsal? What do we need to make better? Right. So it's important that you have a disciplined system that you're following through. And it's important that that system measures the behavior and activities that you're engaging in the business development process. Because what you want is to have high scores that relate to your follow through. You want to have, you know, almost perfect scores when it comes to taking care of the people and the companies and the opportunities that are in your sales funnel, your pipeline, right? You want to make sure that you are golden in terms of your ability to stay in touch, your ability to follow up and follow through. That's part of the 9-step process. So if anybody wants to understand why relationships are critical and how critical relationships could, go back and read that. But that's a super important aspect of maintaining and developing any relationships is your ability to follow up and follow through. Now, before you follow up and follow through, you have to have made some kind of promise or commitment. Because if not, what are you following through on? If you haven't made a promise, you haven't made a commitment, then you're following up on what? You're just talking just to talk. You don't have a reason. You don't have a thought about what the next steps might be in moving the relationship forward. The relationship won't move forward. In fact, it'll stagnate because you won't have a reason to communicate. You won't have a reason to talk. You won't have a reason to move forward. Number seven in the list of traits is you have to have a great amount of commercial judgment. What do we mean by that? When you have good judgment, discipline follow through, right? And then good judgment, you're going to have higher margins of success and fewer bad wins. What do I mean by bad wins? These are wins that you may have accomplished, but then they come off the books for whatever reason. You know, people said yes to you because you're, you know, persistent, or you might even be a nag, but they never really wanted to work with you. They never really enjoyed the potential of the business that they could do for you. And so you may have high margins of success because you are just persistent and you you just keep pushing, 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 pushing. One of those pushy salespeople, right? But that's not good business. That business might not ever actually close. Even for people sign the documents, you might not ever receive the payment that you need to receive. So it's very, very important that you do a great job back in that qualification phase before you start whipping out all your contracts and signing all the deals and forcing people to move forward on things that they're not ready to move forward on in a timely fashion. You have to be careful. You have to have good commercial judgment. When you do this right, obviously, you're going to have um, things that you can measure real simple, like your retention of your business is going to be at a high level. And the pass rate, when you start looking at your net promoter scores or different KPIs that you may be working to achieve or working with, your habits and things like that are going to be, again, all-time high. You're going to be demonstrating wonderful habits, wonderful judgment, discipline, follow through, all that kind of good stuff. Number 8 on our list of traits that good business development professionals always have is resilience and emotional stability. Resilience and emotional stability. The key benefit of having resilience and emotional stability is that you can offer a sustained level of performance through whatever the period of a typical sales cycle might be, even at its longest. So, why is that important? Um, because when you are resilient and you're emotionally stable, people are going to receive you differently than people who are desperate and pushy, and they have what we like to call sometimes in the sales world commission breath, meaning they just can't wait. They gotta close a deal like yesterday. And they're only interested in talking about how can I get this deal done so I can make my commission and move on with my life, right? This is not a professional business development person, because a professional business development person knows that there is a time to close and there is a time to lay back and sort of have fun, examine the land, ask more questions. Because when the time of close appears, it'll be clear that the prospect now is now a potential client wants it, they need it, and they will afford it because you've already had those discussions of how they're going to pay for it. You've already had those discussions of how it's going to work and why it's going to work for them and why they need it, what's important to them about it to receive it, and all those things. You've asked those questions already, and it's time now to go ahead and move through the next level of the sales cycle, whatever those levels are. And they're going to be different levels depending on your product or service. But when you get this right, you can measure a couple things. You can measure your team engagement, right? You know how many times you had to dig deep in your bench and come up with the different kinds of professionals that had come to the table. Different um, cross-functional teams might have come to help you move the deal along somehow, some way. Assuming you're the business development expert or you're the manager of the business development strategy or whatever that is, you're measuring. Um, you're always asking for feedback along the way, and in those feedback cycles, you're getting information that helps you learn and helps you complete the movement from this level of process to that level of process. And so, again, if you don't have the emotional stability and you can't settle and be confident in your competence in this space, then you're going to fall apart. And you're going to sound like a person who's not ready. You're going to sound like a person who doesn't quite know what they're talking about. You're going to sound like a person who may be out of their depth, specifically when you're talking about a complex product or sales a cycle. You're going to want to make sure that you have the patience that you need to have, the resilience that you need to have in order to move the needle and keep things moving forward, right? I was just talking to a client of mine uh, recently about making sure that you don't burn bridges. But it's more important than to not burn bridges. What's most important is that you keep the relationship at a high level, meaning people want to hear from you. They want to engage with you. They want to talk to you because you provide a breath of fresh air. You provide a listening ear. You provide uh, somewhat of a respite from the pressure that they may be receiving as they move forward in their business to receive the goals or whatever they're trying to do. So you'll be always think about how do I elevate the relationship, not how do I avoid burning the relationship. Of course, you don't want to burn the relationship, but you also want to make sure that you're elevating the relationship, doing what you need to do. And you can only do that by asking good questions. When you find that the relationship is taking is stagnating or something, it's not moving forward, it's probably time to ask some more questions. And you don't want to be ridiculous. Like, I mean, I thought we had a good thing here. Why aren't you returning my calls? Um, that's a relevant question, but the way you ask that question may be a bit combative, and it may be a bit um, conducive to uh, causing them to feel they need to be defensive instead of um, asking a question that is a win-win type of question. You're like, I was just calling, Jack. I know I promised you that I would get back to you on the proposal that I shared with you uh, not too long ago, and I told you I call you in about 5 days, so it's 5 days, and I wanted to make sure I'm honoring my commitments and my promises that I make to you. So please do me a favor and give me a call back as soon as you can. Just let me know that you got the proposal and set up a time that we can actually talk. And I hope that works out for you. If not, just let me know, and I'll be more than happy to amend it or fix it or do whatever we need to do to make sure that you and your team are happy. Fair enough. That's it. It's a much better way of moving the relationship along and elevating the relationship without burning the relationship. The ninth trait that great business development people have to have is cross-functional leadership. What do we mean by cross-functional leadership? When you're able to talk and speak across the levels of a department in your organization or organizations that you are dealing with, it's very, very critical in terms of gaining trust and building quality relationships where they matter most. If you're working with a company and you can't stand a certain department or a certain person, right, that's been on that team for quite a while. You don't want to go bad mouthing that person. You don't want to create an environment where that person doesn't feel welcome or supported because that activity will spoil relationships with other members of the team in this organization. And again, this is internal or external. Um, you always thinking as a business development person, how are you leading everyone, not just people on your team, but people on the teams that you're trying to develop um, relationships with. You know, um, I often tell people all the time that wherever I take my wife, people go, well, everybody loves Kimberly. It's like almost like everybody loves Raymond. And it's really true. Everybody loves my wife. And I find that, you know, that is because she's not a threatening person. She's easy to like. right? She's easy to embrace because she doesn't offer anything that's going to make other people feel defensive. She's very, very careful about relationships and how she manages them and how she spends her time with people. So it's very, very important that you think about being a business development leader. You got to be one of those people who knows how to attract others and knows how to avoid the distraction of negative comments or anything that takes the relationships off track. So you have to have those cross-functional leadership skills across departments. It doesn't matter whether you're talking to the research and development department or the marketing team or the accounting group. You might be selling into the operations department, but you also need to have good relationships with other departments in the organization, because when they get in their executive meetings and start talking about why they're doing this and why they're doing that, you want them to mention you in a positive light. Like, oh my God, this salesperson came in, or this person, I got to avoid them at all costs because, I, that's why I put, 7 different layers of barriers in front of actually having an opportunity to build a relationship with me or talk to me. That's number 9, cross-functional leadership. You get this right, you have faster internal alignment, you're ready to deliver, again, quicker with a more quality. And how you measure it is the time it takes you to go from award to kickoff. This is really important for you government contractors types, right? That way you might get the award to do the business, but then, if you don't get the cross-functional leadership straight, then your kickoff may be delayed. And again, back to your net promoter score. Your net promoter score can also measure how other um, teammates from different departments feel about working with you, as well as how other teammates across different functional departments into the organization you might be selling into um, work with you, because you need to know what those scores are. And you need to ask yourself the questions constantly: how do I get better? How do I get better? And you need to work on putting the strategy together to actually make you get better. That's usually called rehearsal, practice, learning, training. Those things you have to do more of once you find the answers to the things that you need to find the answers to, right? Training for training's sake doesn't help you, but training specifically to improve in categories where you need improvement, that helps you. But that can only get there when you measure all of the KPIs that you need to measure in the ways you need to measure them. Okay, last and not least, but one of my favorite aspects, traits of business development people is storytelling and framing. These are two very different concepts, but they're all excellent levels of communication. And I'll talk to you a little bit about both of these. All right. But storytelling is about you being able to share information in a way that is attractive, interesting, and memorable. Right. That's what storytelling does. When you tell a story, people can remember the story much better than they can the qualifications or um, the systems or strategy that you want to share. Although those things are very, very important, wrapping that same information in a story is much more compelling. It's much more memorable. It's much more interesting. And it really, really opens up the emotional levels of the human mind in ways that nothing else can. So you have to be good at storytelling. Framing or reframing is again a way of telling a story or using uh, a literary tool to help you sort of begin to share a mini concept versus the maximum concept. So it may be that in the story you have to talk about a specific detail, and you need to put a perspective on that detail that reminds the person that they could be the person in the story. And when you frame or reframe a concept or an idea in a way that they understand it, then they feel like they're part of the story and they feel like they're valuing and learning along with the characters that's in the story. So it's very, very important that you get good at the storytelling. Now, I have a program called the Five Steps to literally understanding how to tell a compelling story. You have to do that to close great deals. I mean, you're going to close. The more important the deal is, the bigger the deal is, the more value that is in the proposition, the better you have to become at storytelling and framing. Now, I'm not talking about just telling 1,000 stories that don't relate to ultimately what you're trying to accomplish in terms of building the relationship or closing a deal. You don't want to tell stories just to tell a story because you like telling a story or it's fun telling a story because you're going to lose people. They're going to go, wow, it's a great story, but why am I listening to this? And they'll give you points for communicating and having, a great personality and style, but you're still not getting anything done because you're not motivating them to move to do anything because you're all over the place. You're not focused in terms of how you communicate clearly and communicate the value of your offering. When you do this well, not only do you communicate that value well, but you again shorten the time it takes to go from we just met to we're closing the deal and we're working together to make sure that all that happens. So when you do this right, your proposals are clear. And if you can figure out ways to score that proposal and work with your clients and your decision makers to help you score that proposal, then again you learn how ways to improve to the time to decision. When the proposal first lands on the decision maker's desk or in the boardroom or wherever they hear about it and actually engage in it and listen and pay attention to the time they make the decision. Again, you want to shrink that time because all that time is valuable. The last um, trait that I want to discuss with you of great business development people are integrity and long-term orientation. You have to be a person of integrity. Now, Dr. Covey explains this in a wonderful way. You know you have integrity when you can keep your promises to yourself. If you decide you're going to get up and you're going to start going for a run every morning, and then you do it for 1 or 2 mornings and you stop, the level of your integrity is only at 2 meetings before or 2 opportunities before you give up. So there's a level of your integrity where you can make those kinds of promises to yourself. I'm not going to eat this anymore. Or I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to engage in this type of behavior anymore. And you can literally govern yourself accordingly. And the more you get, the more you develop yourself to engage in the right kinds of behaviors in the right kinds of ways in the right kinds of times, often over and over and over again, the more integrity you have, the more you can legitimately ask someone to trust you specifically for the thing that you have loads of integrity around. Now, let's talk about long term orientation. You need to understand that trust is developed over time. That time doesn't have to be a long time, but there has to be some level of time and in the quality that of expertise that you share in that length of time is going to be the difference between you achieving a reputation that yields renewals and advocacy, meaning you want people to continue to do business with you, continue to do business with you over the long term, and you want them in your corner. You want them to give you those endorsements, those recommendations, those referrals. You want them to make sure that they are looking out for your best interest. But this can only happen when you have that long-term orientation. I used to tell clients, early in a relationship, what I'm really working for is your ability to refer me to people that you respect. That's what I want. Yes, I'm going to make money on that deal if we decide to move forward. But what I want more than anything else is to have you comfortable referring me to people that you respect in the industry, in the neighborhood, in within the outreach opportunities, whatever you want to do. But you want to make sure that you have that forward-thinking mind. You're going beyond this deal that's in front of you. You're thinking about the next 3, 4 deals down the road, and you're making sure that you're preserving the relationship so that you can see those opportunities through. This is critical. And one of the things again is your net promoter score is going to, if it's a good strategy you're using or good scoring technique you're using, is going to have a category for developing your client to the point of advocacy, right? Did you get a testimonial? Did you get an endorsement? Did you get a recommendation? Did you get several referrals? These are ways to measure, are they with you for the long term, or is it just a quick commoditized decision that they made to work with you? And they don't expect to hear from you beyond you close the deal, right? All these things are critical um, to becoming an excellent business development person. No matter where you start, no matter where you're going, the better you become in these areas, the more you're going to have success in your business development strategy. And you're going to feel like you can develop your career for the long term. And so people can trust you there for the long term. And the longer people can trust you, the more you develop trust in more and more higher quality people. The you know, one of my managers years ago, you tell me that you're going to make what the highest paid 10 professionals that you work with make on average. And I thought that's an interesting metrics. I don't know how you came up with that, but it does tell me that if I'm working with 10 people that are making over $300,000 a year, then that's the category that I'm thinking I might want to swim in. And so I started looking for people who are making over $300,000 a year. And guess what happened? I found them. And I started making that kind of money too. And I thought, well, maybe I gotta choose a higher level of friends. Maybe I need people who make over $500,000 a year. Where do they work and where do they play and how do I get involved with them? So I started asking my friends who are making $300,000 a year, who do you know who makes $500,000 a year? And again, impressing them enough to earn those referrals and the opportunities in those opportunities to walk in those spaces. And there's no limit to who you can find in terms of those types of things if you learn to qualify at increasingly higher levels of people that you want to work with, deals you want to close. I see my girl Leah's out there, so I'm so glad you're here, Leah. Why don't you let everybody know where you're looking from and where you're calling from? I know you're coming from California, but where in California? What's the time over there, by the way? Put that in information in the chat. And if you have any, again, if you have any questions that we can cover in any of these workshops that we do, like off the shelf workshops we do, then definitely give us a call. Definitely let us know. Next week, we're going to take a deeper dive into the business development mindset, how you can begin to improve your skills as a business development expert and what it's going to mean to you to improve those skills. We talked about the traits today, and I'm going to recap those traits. Um, but these are traits of a person who's excellent at business development. And you can ask yourself, there's a quiz that I have in my report on these things, but you can begin to ask yourself these questions on your own time. How am I doing with these traits? And what can I do to be better at strategic pattern recognition, executive presence, and credibility? Can I become more curious and make sure that, especially in my industry around my products and services, I am really curious about how they work and how they function. And I'm curious about how people are receiving those ideas and concepts. Your relationship intelligence. How am I improving my ability to develop strategies that are multi-level strategies along a lifetime of values and relationships that I might create? Discipline follow through, commercial judgment, resilience and emotional stability, cross functional leadership, storytelling and framing, and finally, integrity and long term orientation. All these traits are super important to work on and develop if you become a good business development person. Do you have to score 100% in all of these? No, you don't. But you have to do well in all of them, and you have to know where you have deficits, and you need to be working on those things that you have deficits in. It's only going to improve your confidence because you're getting more competent, and there's nothing like confidence in a space that is difficult for a lot of other people. When you know what you know, no one can take it from you. No one can even challenge it realistically. And those who would try, you don't even get upset because you realize that they can't win. They don't know what they're talking about. They can't beat you, and or they can't outshine you or out talk you or outsmart you, not in the thing that you have practiced and honed your expertise in. It's not possible. And so you have a different level of confidence. You have a different level of swagger. You have a different level of ability when it comes to being able to communicate, to relate, to convey what's meaningful about your products and services and what is not. And when you get good and you find your tribe and you find your people who really want to work with you, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do from there. So again, next week we're going to get deeper into what it takes to become an amazing business development expert. I hope you guys have enjoyed yourself from Monterey, California. It's so good to have you guys out here. And I thank you for signing in. Thank you for showing up. And I'll see you next Friday around about the 3 o'clock hour. Today, I'm coming back off of a trip. I just came from Atlanta last night. I got home last night around midnight. I drove from Atlanta to DC. That's almost like a 12, sometimes 13-hour drive, depending on how fast you go or how long you can move between stops. I got to stop a long time. Really, it's technically a 9-hour trip, 9.5 hours, but I got to stop. My old man got to stop. So I usually can get through it in 12 to 13 hours, but it takes a lot out of you. So I think I'm gonna take the weekend and just relax. Good to see you guys. Thanks so much for talking to you. And I'll see you again next Friday. Ciao now.